Well, good morning, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Sarah Jennings. I am with Maner Costerisan, and I lead our nonprofit team kind of across all service lines. We're super excited to be able to bring a great partner to you today in Martus. And one of the things that we've been really focused on over really the life of our nonprofit practice, but certainly this year we're focused in nonprofits in tech and that what is the tech stack and how do we make sure that across the board, we're helping our clients to think about how to do more with less, how to use technology to really streamline things and make our lives easier. And as the description for this webinar or this demo says, ditch the spreadsheets. How can we get away from many, many spreadsheets that have all sorts of risks of fat fingering and duplicate spreadsheets and things being saved over one and another? What options do we have? So I'm super excited to bring Chris Grady, Rita Strauss, and I think they might have another team members joining in just a couple of minutes, but I will let you all do some introductions. And again, thank you for joining us, and we are excited to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Much appreciated. And good morning, everyone. My name is Christopher Grady. I am the Director of Partnerships here at Martus, which means I'm one of the points of contact for Maner Costerisan, as they've been a fantastic partner introducing Martus to a host of different nonprofit organizations that are dealing with a host of different challenges as they relate to budgeting, reporting, and forecasting being done in spreadsheets, which is generally the thrust of this webinar. But before I jump into these slides, I will give Rita Strauss the opportunity to introduce herself as well. Maybe there's some different technical difficulty. In that case, I will move on. No trouble at all. So before I turn things over to Joseph Plague, who'll be arriving shortly. He is our Director of Service Delivery. He'll be doing the demonstration for us this morning. I am going to go through just a few slides that I think address some high points that are worth consideration before we dive into the product's functionality. Martus is a 15-year-old company, and we have just over 1,000 customers. Important to note that while we consider our solution to be ERP or accounting software agnostic, we have over 800 of our customers are on either Sage Intacct or QuickBooks of some kind. We also have Blackbaud, Acumatica, and NetSuite, and many file-based integrations as well. But the vast majority of our customers are using either Sage Intacct or QuickBooks. So we have a truly intimate knowledge of, excuse me, how not only Sage Intacct and QuickBooks as products, but how our solution in particular interacts with those solutions. Also important to note that over 95% of our customer base is nonprofits of various stripe. These 6 bullets here in healthcare, social service nonprofit, membership organization, education, church, and arts and culture, I think are the larger portion of nonprofits that we serve. However, important to note that there's municipal governments there and a variety of other nonprofits are represented in our customer base as well. Some key differentiators as we're thinking about moving away from spreadsheets and into a product like Martus is we integrate seamlessly with either Sage Intacct or QuickBooks. We have a very rapid implementation. When you evaluate other budgeting and planning solutions on the market, in many cases, you'll see that it's a months-long implementation. And with Martus, it is only several weeks. We are ready to use immediately, meaning much of the apprehension, anxiety associated with the implementation of these products, as well as their internal adoption. There are out-of-the-box financial reports that Joseph will show you during the demonstration that are available to customers before the end of the first implementation call. So a lot of that anxiety around time to value is eliminated very quickly because Martus has value before the full implementation is completed. We have release notes every 2 weeks. That might be something as significant as our cash flow forecasting functionality. It might be something as minute as buttons being moved around on particular screens because we've had a lot of customer feedback requesting that being done. Nevertheless, every 2 weeks we have release notes. They are published not only in newsletter form to our customers, but they're also shared again on the welcome screen of our product so that there's a lot of retention associated with the product's evolution. You'll get an opportunity to see we intentionally, as sort of the hallmark of Martus is a collaborative environment. It was designed with non-finance employees in mind that were nevertheless going to participate in a decentralized budgeting process. So you'll see how between our budget widget and the sort of the overall user interface, that it is not a, dare we say, it's not an intimidating solution to a lot of folks that do not have a finance background. And last but not least, in terms of differentiators in the nonprofit, I'm sorry, in the FP&A and budgeting space, many of these products struggle with adoption, struggle with sort of a user education, and Martus is not the case. We have a very low churn rate. The individuals that benefit, it's important to note, it might be a board member that is engaged with your organization, that has a finance background, that wants to sort of have a much broader visibility of the organization. It might be an executive director who truly wants to understand the organization from a variety of different reporting senses of perspective. Obviously, CFOs, VPs of finance, this is very much a financial tool, in which case, with a decentralized budgeting process, allows your finance executives to do a whole lot more strategic thinking as opposed to being sort of in the weeds as it relates to administrative tasks and things like that. Again, with controllers being sort of the champions of the reporting processes, you're going to get a chance to see that through an overnight sync, that organizations are working with real-time data as it relates to reporting. It might be budget to actuals year to date. It might be your income statement. You'll get the opportunity to see a host of different reports that are available to you out of the box with Martus. And then last but not least is operations folks to really understand the totality of the budgeting of the way the organization is budgeting. Martus has that full visibility, all the budget worksheets. We can, whether it's a restriction at a budget manager level where their visibility into the system is very limited, all the way up to an administrative viewer where you can see and do everything in the system. From an operational standpoint, if an individual had was an admin user status, he or she can see everything in the system. So it becomes vital to operations through that visibility. And then last but not least, really is sort of, do these sound familiar? We hear these repeatedly from folks that are in spreadsheets considering what a move into a software solution might look like. I think it's important to note, all of us really do appreciate, in many cases, love our spreadsheets. They are extraordinary. Spreadsheets are extraordinary. However, they're not really scalable at all. And all of the sort of difficulty in and around spreadsheets as organizations scale, as they navigate sort of economic uncertainty. To be frank, if we're navigating sort of the evaluation of the nonprofit sector as it relates to the new presidential administration, there's a lot of things that need to be sort of digested and consumed and considered. So the finance team burdened with administrative tasks, and there's no time for strategic thinking. Our budgeting and reporting processes, are they really time consuming and error prone because cell formulas are getting broken, because email attachments from individual to individual, sort of a game of telephone, and things get terribly confusing? Because you're not working with real-time data, are your forecasts truly accurate? Or because there needs to be this sort of consistent maintenance of data, you're finding that your organizations do not have accurate forecasting? Further, an approval process without sort of visibility into who owns what worksheets, who the approvers are, there can be a very sort of time-consuming process associated with approvals, and Martus completely eliminates that. As I was saying earlier, non-finance leadership struggles. Do non-finance employees that are nevertheless tasked with budgeting, do they struggle with cell formulas? Do they struggle with Excel in a general sense? The user interface with Martus eliminates all of that because it's approachable and very, very easy to understand. And last but not least, but terribly important for nonprofits, is capacity planning. Are your organizations doing capacity planning in Excel spreadsheets? Is it a struggle because you're not working with real-time data? All of these concerns are eliminated with Martus because what we are in essence providing you with is the familiarity of spreadsheets, the familiarity of Excel and Google Sheets, but added just a lot of workflow automation in the context of spreadsheets. So familiar in terms of a user standpoint, but we're adding a lot of workflow automation so that your budgeting and reporting processes are no longer sort of clunky and cumbersome, but really moving at the speed that your organization truly needs it to move at. Those are really my slides at this time that I wanted to share. At this time, I would like to turn things over to Joseph for a product demonstration. Let me see one quiet. I'm going to see if I can ping him very quickly. We'll get him to arrive as soon as possible. But in the meantime, what I'll share with you is I'm glad that we're in the chat. If you have any questions as we go through the demonstration, please add them to the chat and I will answer them in real time to the best of my ability. If we don't get to those questions during this demonstration, I will be certain that we make note of all of these questions and I will answer them in email form at a later date. I would imagine definitely before the end of the week. In the meantime, as you've seen the slides, I'm curious to know in the chat, as Sarah just asked, are there any sort of key areas? Is personnel top of mind? Is reporting top of mind? Are allocations as it relates to headcount planning top of mind? Curious to know about your organization's struggles and if there's anything that's sort of high priority in this demonstration that you'd like to see while we're waiting for Joseph to arrive. But in the meantime, I will also tell you all, it's important to note that I said this in the bullets prior, but the the solution really does apply to sort of the broader nonprofit sector. I had mentioned arts and culture, social service organizations, religious institutions, healthcare, municipal governments. If I have not mentioned your organization in the context of this presentation thus far, it's important to know that through the budget, the flexibility of the budget worksheets, the flexibility of the reporting, and also the flexibility of what we'll show you as special purpose worksheets, we'll have the opportunity to recognize that the solution is truly applicable to any kind of nonprofit organization and not just the ones that I've highlighted up to this point.
That is great. And Chris, if you want to take a minute just to make sure that you can connect with Joseph, I will take just a second to say some benefits that I've seen clients that are already using Martus. Oftentimes when we have these shared spreadsheets, like I said in the beginning, that one of the biggest challenges is we might have department heads that are trying to create their own budget or submit their kind of best case, what they want to get out of a budget to the CFO or the controller or somebody. And there's all of this work on the back end to try to combine it all together and put it out into a workable document. In that process, there's a couple things that we see going wrong frequently. One is something's missed because we're all human and this is a very manual process. Two, sometimes, files are saved over or something just doesn't flow the right way. It doesn't get updated through the various different versions. Those are all huge challenges. One of the things that Martus does is it's all in one place. So it's kind of like the Holy Grail, the Bible of your budget, for lack of a better way to put it. And it's really allowed an increase in security, an increase in flexibility, which is kind of strange to think about sometimes because usually increased security actually is less flexibility. But I feel like it's really empowered the clients that are on it, empowered their directors to be able to hold themselves accountable for the budget. The other thing that it's really streamlined for them and made easier is if it's an organization that may have scenario planning or may have some additional things that they're trying to figure out the what if. And I know there are still a lot of nonprofits that are going through, like, we might have to change. We're still pivoting. We're still trying to figure out what the post-pandemic world looks like for our organization. Did we move from, focused on our membership dues or focused on events to whatever our new revenue drivers might be? This scenario planning that Joseph is going to go through, and I apologize for the delay here, but the scenario planning that they have really allows you, without modifying the budget, to have another schedule that you can do all of that scenario planning that uses the personnel data. So it's actual benefits, it's actual wage rates right in there. Those are all secure, so nobody has to know the individual amounts for the wages and benefits, but the lump sums flow in to all of those departmental and kind of the scenario planning reports. Rita or Chris, any luck with Joseph? I'd hate to have to reschedule this, but I certainly want to be respectful of people's time. I don't see any questions out there.
I think Chris is just going to get confirmation. If Joseph can't jump on it, I believe Chris will be able to jump in and do that piece. So.
Yeah.
Okay, that's perfect. And it actually looks like Joseph may have joined as an attendee, Chris. So
Can we promote him then, or do we need to?
Let's see. He needs to be a panelist as opposed to an attendee.
So while Cheyenne and Chris kind of work on getting Joseph to the right area, Rita, are there any other things that you've seen? So I don't have to ramble anymore. Welcome, Joseph.
Yeah.
My apologies. Lots of difficulties on my side this morning. I'm in the right place now.
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay, yes, and we are excited to show Martus. Sarah, is there any particular place you'd like for me to start?
No, I think that the group, we don't have any specific questions, but obviously nonprofit based, and they're excited to see all the flexibility, security, all the things Martus has to offer.
Excellent. Okay, well, I'll get my screen share going. Okay, so I'm going to start us off in the planner section. And over on the left side menu, you're going to see a dashboard area where you can get some quick budget versus actual reporting. We'll take a look at that a little bit later. The planner section is where we'll spend most of our time here through this webinar. So we're building budgets or creating new forecasts. Personnel budgeting, so as you budget headcount, there's a specific area for that. It is permission based so that only people that you want seeing those details can actually see that. And one thing I'll point out too under the setup area is I'm going to be an admin user. So you can work with other users, have other users in the system and restrict them so that they don't see and do everything, right? As an admin today, we're going to be able to see and do everything. So if I come to Ed's user, just to kind of give you an example here, notice that he's not going to get access to personnel budgeting or certain other features. And then on the dimensions, we can have up to 8 dimensions in Martus. And so I've got 3 dimensions configured. Basically, I'm telling Ed, you only get access to this 100 location. And inside of that one location, we're going to say only, let's do just the professional services department, right? So when he logs into Martus and he's creating a budget or he's looking at a report, it'll be for those specific areas. He won't see anything else. So very granular user permissions, role-based. Now, I'm going to come back over here to the planner section. And the report that we're seeing on the screen right now is just a summary of the 2025 budget that we're working on right now. So Martus has a very collaborative environment. So you have multiple people probably working on budgets. The way we facilitate this collaboration is through budget worksheets. So behind the scenes of this report, consolidated view of the budget, when I drill in to say, let's look at office supplies, this is showing me all the different areas where someone has budgeted some office supplies. And the point I want to make here is, as users are working in these different worksheets, Martus will take everyone's work from all these different areas and consolidate that in real time into one overall budget, right? So you can see everybody's work coming together in real time, and then the effect on the bottom line here of the budget. Now, I want to talk more about those worksheets here in just a second, but before I do, you'll notice some pre-built reports up here to do comparisons. If you want to see, how it's comparing to the trailing 12 or annualized or last year's budget, things like that. You can get that analysis real easy. Do side-by-side comparisons. If you have, more than one version or do different forecasts, you can easily compare those. Also on these reports, you're going to see flexibility on rows and columns. So right now, it's just a standard view looking at our accounts on the rows. Okay. And then my columns are set to months. But notice if I wanted to say, let's expand my columns by department instead. It's real easy to get a little different view, kind of like pivoting this data set to see dimensionality along with accounts, or I can even put other dimensions on my rows. So lots of flexible reports. Of course, you can filter this down, see specific areas of the budget, and keep in mind when a user logs in, they're only going to see their area of the budget. Now, on to the worksheets. And this is where we're going to show really the typical user experience. This is a listing of these worksheets for this location. Before I go into one of them, notice over here to the right, you're going to see owners and approvers. And what's going to happen is when someone submits their worksheet, they've finished their budget, they submit it, it locks it down, and it sends an email to whoever that approver is. Now, that approver can be more than one as well with different levels. They can leave comments back to that user. So if it was submitted and they rejected it or denied it, they can leave those comments and say, please update XYZ. Now, let's go into one of these and talk about the typical user experience. Let me close a couple windows. I'm going to reset this really quick. Okay, so what we're looking at right now is the budget worksheet for this location and this department. You're going to see down in the gray section the budget lines. And these budget lines are coming based upon what we have in our reference section. So up in the reference section, we're showing our current year actuals. In my demo environment, my current year is 24. Showing current year actuals through June right now with budget for the last 6 months. Now, what's really nice is you can also drill in to what's blue, right? And so if we're looking at actuals and we drill in, we'll see transaction detail for this area for that specific month in budget line. In this case, there was only one transaction. That's really helpful for users to kind of get an idea of what's happened in the current year as we're working on next year's budget, or maybe it's a new forecast. Now they get that reference section, and by the way, there's other points of reference as well, to help them fill out the budget section below. Now to do this, there's a couple different ways to get us going. I could use this initialize feature, which is kind of an automated way to take maybe our actuals from the current year and apply those to next year as a starting point. Or again, we're not through with the current year just yet. We're going to take budget and apply that as a starting point. Now I can also increase or decrease those numbers. If I leave it at 100%, you're seeing that we've just taken what's in reference and applied it to next year's budget as that starting point. Now, salaries we haven't done just yet. We'll talk about that in a separate module that Sarah was alluding to before. All right, how do we update this then? I can click into a budget line. You'll see it opens it up, and I can tab through and type in some amounts. Or I can use this little calculator. In fact, that's what a lot of our users will use. It's what we call the budget widget. And the reason why they like this is because it gives them some quick adjustments or calculations. And give you a couple examples here. Maybe you want to budget some supplies on a monthly basis, $100 a month. I'll preview that. See, it makes that monthly spread. If I want to do it on a weekly spread, $100 a week. Notice there's a 4 weeks, and a 5-week weekly spread there. If I do biweekly, quarterly, or annual, same principle. It's just spreading those amounts based on what we've designated there. So $1,000 a year becomes $833 a month. Now there are custom spreads you could build. You could also do what we call a burn rate and take like the average of a certain last 6 months or last 12 months and apply that average. Or I like to show this copy existing values. Take the trailing 12. This is just demo data you're seeing here. Obviously, you'll have not going to be the same amounts every month, but let's increase that by 10% for next year. Preview that, and you'll see the 1523 becomes the 1676. Now I'm going to put notes here for the person who is approving my worksheet. They're going to want to know how I got to these numbers. And so that would be those would be some of my assumptions. Leave them a little trail there. And you'll see when we save it, it updates that budget line. And the icon turns blue, which tells us there are notes there. And as I hover over, we can see those notes. All right, so that's just getting us started. This is, again, a typical user experience, filling out a budget worksheet. There are other options that we don't have time to go into. If you need to do special detailed lines, if you want to itemize your software subscriptions, right, you can do that as well. That's what we call special purpose worksheets are for. If you need to do maybe some other calculations or formulas, maybe there's some drivers to drive revenue or other expenses based on volumes and rates, right? You can also do that in a special purpose worksheet. So to kind of go back to where we started, the work that we just did in this area of the budget, that has now been consolidated into the overall budget. So this is where we started, right? If I were to filter by the accounting department, you're going to see those numbers that we just worked on are in the budget. Okay. All right, so that's high level view of the process for creating a budget. The worksheets get set up. They can be set up automatically based upon actuals or prior year budgets. Users go into those worksheets, make their updates, submit it for approval. Now you could also do different forecasts. So if I go back to 2024, you're going to see I've got multiple versions and different forecasts here, right? So you can load actuals, say for the first 6 months, and then make new projections the last 6 months, or the 9+3, same principle. So the only difference you're going to see in the budget worksheets that we showed before would be those actuals that were loaded into those first months will be locked down. You can't make changes. And then you just make changes to the remaining months that are still open. But same process, same budget worksheets. Let me address personnel budgeting because this is going to feed into those worksheets. If I come over here to our scenarios, you're going to see I have two different scenarios here. One's a base scenario, kind of where everybody's at right now. And then I make a copy of it and say, what if we did some COLA adjustments? Or what if we added some new positions? It is position-based budgeting. And these positions can be tied to specific employees. They could be vacant positions, or they could be even what we call pooled positions. So as an example of that, instead of having like 7 counselors listed, I could have 1 counselor position that represented 7 FTEs if you didn't want to track it one by one. So you'll have those options, flexibility here. If I click into one of these, a couple of things that we're tracking on the positions, FTEs, you can define that. So you can get an FTE report, start and end dates. If it's left blank like this, we're telling Martus to budget all 12 months, right? But if you have someone that's seasonal or someone you're not going to hire until a certain date, you can plug those in so it only calculates for those periods. Down below, we tell Martus where it needs to hit the budget. And what I would say to this is these are the primary dimensions before any allocations, right? So there is an option to do allocations of personnel. So if you need to split somebody between departments, locations, projects, any dimension like that, you can allocate them. And then over here to the right, the pay types. So these are all the different ways that employees would be compensated, their pay, benefits, taxes. These are all, again, user defined. You can set them up the way you need to with different frequencies that you see over here. And so this is going to drive their compensation, how they're going to hit the budget. I click that little view detail link and it brings us to the detail tab. And this is going to break this position down by pay type. Okay, so you can see the fully loaded amount for this position for the year, broken down by pay type, and then of course broken down by month as well. Now, one thing I want to show here, let's just pretend that we were in a different scenario. And I said, let's take everybody that's on salary. So consider our COLA scenario. I can do a select all, so everybody with salary here. Update pay items. And then over here, you're going to see starting and ending months. Let's say we want to do a mid-year increase starting in July and do it percentage based. You can do it based on anniversary dates, do flat amount adjustments. But let's just, for sake of example here, do a 5% increase on salary starting in July for all of our salaried positions. Okay. And you're going to see the bump there from June and into July, that 5% bump. Anything dependent on salary, like retirement matches and taxes, all of that automatically gets updated and just flows through the scenario. So the point here is you can have these different scenarios, compare them and figure out which one you'd like to use in the overall budget. So I'm going to recalculate that really quick. Now, when it goes to the budget, right, this is independent right now of those worksheets that we were looking at before. But eventually we need to get that over there. And so the way you do that is you come to the summary tab and you choose the budget that you want to post this to. And it's going to post to those budget worksheets in summary by account and then those dimensions. Okay. And so when I say in summary is because all that detail that we've seen up to this point, that's in this module, which is permission based. Otherwise, in the worksheets, it'll just be the summary amounts by account and dimension. On top of that, I'll say this as well. There's a feature inside of Martus where if you set certain accounts to be restricted, like personnel accounts, and a user doesn't have permissions to view restricted accounts, they won't even see those in their budgets or on reports, right? So you can get even more granular with account restrictions and permissions there. All right, one other thing I do want to show here in personnel is that allocation piece. So if we were looking at one of the positions, in fact, I'll just pull up the same one we did before. That was Daisy. This is Daisy on those primary dimensions that we showed on her position setup. Now, when I bring in the allocation that we set up for Daisy, you're going to see I have split her to these other 4 departments. And you'll see the breakdown for the total compensation that would be allocated to those areas and how that breaks down hours, FTEs, and the monthly amounts as well. So if I were to take this filter off and I put this in a dimensional view, for instance, here's everybody on the professional services department, and a little bit of Daisy is right there from that allocation. So we've got 4.2 on FTEs, about $372,000 for the year on this department. So you can easily see those roll-ups, who's still in the positions, and the detail behind that is all in personnel budgeting. Okay, well, let me show you a little bit about the reporting section over here. So under dashboard, and I come to my financials, this is going to be some on-demand reports out of the box, pre-built reports that users can interact with. And keep in mind when they're logging in, it'll be automatically filtered based on their permissions. So they look at some of these pre-built visualizations and they look at departments, they're only going to see departments you've given them access to. Now I'm going to come back to our income statement here and just kind of walk you through this a little bit because there's a few things to talk about. Number one, of course, you can filter this down, right? Mix and match those filters to slice and dice the data. You can modify the rows and columns. So if I wanted to say, instead of the accounts on my rows, let's get a little higher level view by department, what that monthly activity looks like through June so far by department. Or if I wanted to see the overall gain or loss by department. Basically what that does is it nets the income and expenses together into one line by department and see the overall gain or loss each month, year to date, and how that compares to budget. Okay. Now, the other thing you can do is maybe I go back to the account view and expand it by years. And I want to see maybe 3 years, 4 years. We can bring as much historical data in as you'd like. Or if we want to do, again, dimensions across columns, just different ways to do this. Real easy, real quick to get those different views. Now, if there are certain reports that you create and you want to get to that with a click of a button next time, you can save that. You'll see I got a grant view on this specific grant. And this one started in 21, goes through 22, and I can see that annual activity, and I can further drill in and see the monthly activity as well, and how that compares to budget. This far right column, you'll see the total. So the total award across both years being 500,000, and then the expenses against that at 468. All right, so these are just some pre-built reports. Show you one other here. If you want to see a monthly comparison, how it breaks down month over month and what those variances are, you can do that as well. I got a filter here. Let's take off my filter and show it consolidated. All right, so lots of options around that. And there's also a custom report builder. So we'll take a look at this, and then I'll wrap up and just hit on cash flow forecasting, and then we'll be finished here. So with the custom report builder, you're going to see some templates to start from. You could add one from scratch, which will actually kind of give you a starting point even when you add a new one. But the point here is when you do want to do some other formatting or put rows, columns in different orders, calculations on those, that's where you would use the report builder. Or even if you want to do other coloring, formatting options, as well as maybe some other KPI cards or charts and graphs, you can build those. So this is what I call a butterfly report, where on my left wing, I've got current month comparisons, actuals, budget, and prior year, current month, those differences. In my right wing, I've got the year-to-date numbers, prior year-to-date. Down the middle, I've got my departments expanded by my account groups, or as we call them in Martus, account categories. So I can certainly get this down to the account level as well, or summarize it, like I've got here. So lots of options in the report builder. The last piece I'm going to show, as I mentioned, is the cash flow forecasting. And when you have a budget complete, so just to kind of set the stage for this, the cash flow forecasting piece is based on a budget that you create in Martus, right? Those worksheets that we were looking at before. And there's some settings around that you assign to accounts called amortization schedules, which basically define the impact of the timing on cash. Those get set and then set up on the accounts. So that then drives the reports that you see here. And I'm going to start with this balance sheet impact report. Load this. So with this report, you're going to see the balance sheet accounts that are being impacted directly based on the underlying budget. I could drill into this to see those budget lines, or I could drill into this amort for amortization and see the amortization schedule for that line. There we go. And you can see where on the budget we hit insurance. So prepaid here, where it's going to go in and out of AP, but also affects our prepaid account. So as we recognize that expense, we're going to decrease that prepaid, right? So you're able to set those details up as well and see how that's affecting the balance sheet. The projected balance sheet, moving on to the next one now. Again, choose the budget you want to base this on, and you'll have your starting balances. You'll see the impact on cash driven by that underlying budget. And so if we have a starting balance of 520, we're dropping 83 from operations or some other CapEx expenditures. It affects, of course, that projected cash balance, right? So these are all projected balances based on that underlying budget. Here's that prepaid that we were just looking at, that schedule. Okay. The last report I'm going to show is the statement of projected cash flows. What I like about this one, this is actually my favorite one, is it gives us the why, right? Why is cash projected to increase or decrease each month? Is it from our operations where we've, based on that net gain or loss from the operating budget we've created, is that the culprits? Or as we go to the investing activities section, do we have, some PP&E here that we might need to put off to a later date? Or financing activities, right? So all of this is driving that projected increase or decrease month over month in cash. So to finalize and quickly summarize here, and certainly happy to address any questions if they've come in. We've looked at the dashboard area. Again, budget versus actual reporting for users. They're only going to see what you give them access to based on their permissions. Planner section is where we're creating budgets or new forecasts. Got that personnel module for headcount planning as well as the cash flow forecasting piece. All right. Sarah, are there any questions?
Yeah, so anybody else, now is a great time. If you do have any questions, please either put it into the Q&A section or into the chat. And we do have a few that have come in, a couple specifically related to the allocations. And you did a great job, Chris, I think, at going through the big picture functionality on the personnel side. So 2 questions related to that. Is there a max number of allocations? So I think you had 4 departments there. If it was grants that they were allocating across, is there a limit on that?
No, there's not. You can continue setting up those allocations. We call them segments for that allocation. And so on each employee there, just to give you a little insight into this, you can certainly add more targets, right? You're just selecting which dimensions you need to allocate to. And in my case, I have a tag, right? If I want to allocate to different grants in my setup, I could do that here with the project dimension.
Perfect. And then does that work the same way if it's not a personnel allocation that we're doing?
So it's a little bit different on non-personnel allocations. I was going to come over here to my special purpose worksheets. So I mentioned these SPWs in passing in the worksheet, but with the special purpose worksheets, you would also use this feature to create other, allocations. For instance, rent, utilities, other overhead allocations. This is where you would set those up. And you can see, for instance, where I've got, an allocation basis, in this case, square footage, maybe it's headcount or something else. What am I going to allocate and where am I going to allocate it to? So in this case, I'm allocating utilities across different departments based on their share of the square footage. So it actually hit their worksheet, sales, marketing, HR, with those amounts from the allocation.
Perfect. I think that is all that we had on allocations. Again, I've got a couple more that have come in, but if you have anything else, we've got a few more minutes. We can answer questions. But one question I frequently get is, what does the implementation process look like from how much time the client's going to need to be part of that implementation? And then what does it look like related to adoption and training after that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I will pull up our standard process here. Now, you might do something a little bit different there with Maner Costerisan. So just to give you kind of a quick snapshot, if we're talking to different training sessions, this is how we typically break them down. Cash flow forecasting, let me give you this as well, adds a couple more sessions. You're going to see prep time, and the prep time that we recommend is really articles, videos, tutorials going through in our knowledge base. You'll see links here and some estimated prep time for that. And then our estimated live training time as well, that is recorded. And of course, there's some follow-up after the training sessions. But as a general rule, we're looking at this over the course of usually 3 to 4 weeks.
And then related to training, and this is kind of more from your experience rather than just a schedule, when you're bringing in non-financial folks, the department heads and things to utilize this, how have you seen them kind of grasp it and really latch on and adopt the program?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got actually a nice Martus Basics learning path for those end users that shows them how to fill out a budget worksheet. So everything I showed today is more probably than they're going to need to know about or see, because really what they're going to be concerned with is the budget worksheets and then the financial reports, right? So how to run a budget versus actual report, which is very straightforward. It pops up for them just like this. They can see budget versus actuals. So how to get there and then how to maybe put it in different views or use the filters. That'd be part of what they would do. And the worksheets, how to fill out a budget worksheet. And that's where we started here, right? Filling out those different budget lines, looking at reference materials in the worksheet. So it's very simplified. What I like to say to that is if Martus is 3 feet wide, the train the trainer approach, those trainers get all 3 feet, but those end users probably just need about 6 inches of that. And that is how to fill out a worksheet, how to run a report.
That is wonderful. I did just put one final thing in the chat, just a thank you to everyone. If you do have any follow-up or you'd like to chat with the Martus folks, we have trainers on the Maner team also that implement and train on Martus and help with the integrations to various different accounting software packages. If you have any questions on what accounting platform you're on, if that integrates, we certainly can answer those questions as well. I want to thank Joseph, Chris, and Rita for their time today. We really are excited to continue to expand this partnership and help all of you nonprofits be able to project out. I think that specifically related to that cash flow forecasting in this day and age, whether you're an organization that has ups and downs because of events or dues cycles or whatever that might be, or you're reliant on grants and those may be questionable at this point in the world, or reimbursement-based grants, how you're going to make it to that next time. I think just looking through that functionality really saves a ton of time in Excel spreadsheets and cash forecasts. So thank you again. I did put in there also, if you have any questions, you'll get this recording from us following this session with some additional follow-up. But I put in there, Timbo Grackus is our Director of Business Development. He will be able to set up and coordinate any additional demos or meetings and answer any questions that you might have. Thank you all.
Grateful for the opportunity, Sarah. Thanks for everyone in attendance. Take good care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.